So, as to everyone, welcome. This is Becca B, and this is Becca's Book Talks. And here I have with my guest, Dr. Kathleen Walls. So,
How you
welcome.
doing? Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, and how did you get to know? Because I was introduced to you by Osiris Munir. How do you know her?
So I had a chance to meet Osiris years ago at this point, I think back in about 2012. She knew my husband. And so my husband made the connection. We have a nonprofit, a 501c3 organization called Sisters in Harmony.
Yeah,
And that was
I
how
just
we
looked that
met.
up.
hmm
That's awesome. All
Yeah.
right. So, and so you got a question to look over the questionnaire, right?
Yes, I did.
Awesome. So starting with the first, and I think you wanted me to ask a question. I believe that was about the writer's process.
So the writer's process, that was something I was saying we can talk about when you come on my podcast.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what are the top 10 books that have influenced your life and in your
hmm
profession, whether it be personal narratives or stories that have left a lasting impression on you, and why?
Yes, I have to say that was a very important question, and it was hard to pick the top 10.
I don't
Um,
mind if you pick more than 10.
okay, but I did go with 10, and I went through my library and I was like, all right, which one? So the first one that came to mind was actually it's called The Personal Power Through Awareness, and that is by Sanaya Roman. And that was the first time I read a book that I felt like I wrote. And it was just like, when did I write this book? It just resonated so much with me, the thoughts, the way that things were phrased. So that's the one that came up first. The Game of Life and How You Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn, the Bible, and various iterations from New International Version to the Message version, the Amplified, because I think the different versions create different understanding within me. One Day My Soul Opened Up by Iyanla Vanzant. Brothers and Sisters by B.B. Moore Campbell. That was the biggest book I had ever read and didn't know that I could get through a book that size. And it was so engaging and vivid. It just opened up my mind that it was just like, wow, people can really write like this. Hidden by Moonlight by Ambahara Mayat. And that was another book that was just so vivid and it just opened up more inside of me. The Moses Code by James Twyman. The
Moses
Dream,
Code.
yeah, The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. And The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which is just such a great book. And The Shack by William P. Young. Those were kind of the books that just ran to the forefront of my brain. And when I was just kind of looking at my library, it was like those were the ones that really jumped out amongst the other ones.
Yeah. I've actually read a few of the ones that you mentioned, like Paul. I'm sorry, I can barely talk. I did read The Alchemist. I did read
hmm
the Game of Life.
hmm
Um, I've never heard of. Let me see. I know you mentioned. I'm not sure if it's the. I don't think I have the Moses Code. I think it's called the Life Codes,
Okay. Okay.
but I'm not sure. I can double check on that.
Yeah.
And I did read The Shack. That one was sort of, this is not about me, but The Shack personally, I was into it and then I was
hmm
not into it. There was just
hmm
some things that I agreed with and some things I
hmm
did not. That was just,
hmm
but that's just
hmm
me. So of those 10, which of those books would you recommend for readers today?
Definitely the personal power through awareness. It just life and helping people navigate it and the importance of self-awareness and how they're responding to things around them. I think that one gives that type of insight that it seems as though people are really searching for nowadays. So,
So, what was the last story that you read, and what were your thoughts and takeaways from that one?
So the last story I read was actually from my own book,
Okay. And which one was
which
that?
is that one is Froggy Foo and Mungu. So from the Adventures of Froggy-T and Bunnie, a hip hop tale. And that one is, I have five books in my series, but I have to say that's probably my favorite. It is also the densest book. And it's because it is about a story of when Froggy T was younger, he was a bully. And then it was his road to redemption to becoming his authentic self. And it talks about how he had put on this bullying mask because he was bullied when he was younger, and he thought that was the persona that he wanted to carry. But when he actually sat with himself, he realized that his authentic self was really someone who didn't want inner or outer strife and wanted to do things that he enjoyed and connect with people. And so he had to learn how to pour into his life so that he could be his authentic self.
Interesting.
Hmm.
That's cool. So, are you taking part in any reading challenge or from a local library group or another type of challenge at the present time?
So for myself, I am. And it's funny, I was speaking with a client right at the like top of the year, end of the year, beginning of the new year, and they were saying how they had created their own personal reading challenge and that they had wanted to do a book a month. And we talked about like what type of genre and so forth. And I realized when I got off that call, I was like, I hadn't made a reading goal for myself. And so it was like, all right, are you going to keep it to yourself? Are you going to make it public and invite people? Because I do host book clubs for companies. And so
Cool.
I was like, all right, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I was going to keep it to myself and maybe do like a book a month. And so then I started setting my reading goals and then identifying which books was I okay with doing audiobooks so that I could be on the treadmill and listen versus which books do I want paperback because I do like to be able to reference in sessions and write. And then again, to the point of the genre, which ones are more self-help. So currently I'm listening to Penny Pierce's The Intuitive Way. And she wrote the book Frequency. And I'm really feeling like I'm going to have to get that in paperback because she talks about so many things that I find myself on the treadmill pausing and then contemplating. And I'm like, I really want to write something right now, but I have 40 minutes left and I don't want to miss those thoughts in that moment. So again, there's some books that I think for me are good audiobooks, and there's some books that I definitely need. I had been listening to Atomic Habits. That one I feel as though I can listen to. Again, it's very similar in the way that I think, in the way that I live my life. So I don't feel like I have to write so much down. But I have a lot of clients that I am teaching intuition to that she says some very poignant things that it makes me think about my clients. And I'm like, oh, they need to be able to turn to page such and such, as opposed to, on an audio book, it's like, all right, go to 2 minutes and 53 seconds. And again, I have to document that.
Do you find this is kind of like I don't want to say it's on a tangent, but it's an expand and it's I guess it's an expanded question off of this one.
Hmm.
When it comes to because as a kid, I'm not sure if this is something that you did, but as a kid growing up, I would listen to like the Disney sing read along books
Mm,
through a cassette tapes. Those to me were like an audio version, but I still felt like I needed to have the story in front of me. I find it really
mm,
difficult to listen to audio because I want the feel of the book in
yeah,
my hands. Is that is
yeah.
that is that the same way with you for some of
Yeah,
them?
I have to say, it's so interesting because I know this kind of jumps ahead with like the banned books. There were some books on that list, which some colleagues of mine had given to me in audio. And so I was like, because I would do a lot of driving for work, and they were like, this is a great way for you to get your reading done and so forth. And it was very hard for my mind to get into the audio book of it. And it took a lot, I felt like it took longer for me to adapt to that than it did for me to pick up a book and just open it and read it. And again, being an educator, being a life coach, I'm always taking note for self and for others. And I can't do that in the audiobook. And then if I find my attention stopping, at least with a book, I can put a bookmark in it, close it, right? Tend to whatever's distracting me or wherever my mind, allowing my mind to go and then come back. But in the audiobook, I find that it just continues to play. And even though I'm zoned out, I'm not stopping it. And then all of a sudden, when I come back in from whatever thought I've been integrating, it's like, oh my goodness, now I have to rewind. And I don't know I don't know when my tangential thinking started. And now I have to almost go back and re-listen to everything. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure if your mind works the same way as mine. Everyone is different, but like when it comes to audio books,
mhm,
but just by themselves, does your mind work like a camera? Like when they're describing
mm,
something or when there's dialogue,
mhm,
does your mind
mhm,
suddenly like for instance, this is just one just this off the bat. If you're driving and you're listening to an audio, it's like your eyes have to be focused on the road, but then your mind is sort of like
yeah,
creating this third camera that
yeah,
takes over, and suddenly you're like, what's
that's fact. That is very fascinating. I hadn't thought about it. I, yeah, it is interesting. And because, right, I think it depends on the depth of which of the content that you're
yeah.
taking in, right? Will determine what is the movie that's being created in your mind's eye. And so some of the books that I was listening to, they're more dense in subject matter as opposed to my mother who listens to audiobooks. She was an avid reader. She was a reading specialist. So she loved it, but now she's older and she can't read. Her eyes just aren't working the way that they used to. So we found that she does enjoy audiobooks because it kind of takes her back to the time where it was radio and you had to use your own imagination. So she loves like suspense and mystery and thrillers. And so we play a lot of that for her. And she enjoys it because it allows her mind to work in that way while she's sitting in her chair or lying in the bed, not driving a car, So there isn't that level of interruption, I would say, right?
That's what it is. Yeah, interruption. Yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, I do like the feel of a book. Now, when I was younger, I would not mark in any of my books. So I would always keep a separate notebook on the side. And I would just say I mean, honestly, maybe within the last 2 years have I actually started writing in my books. And the reason why I didn't do it before was because if I ever found a book very helpful, I would loan it to a friend or loan it to a client. And I wanted their reading to be uninterrupted by my thoughts and notes.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm, that's cool. So for your challenge, so you actually made your own
So I did.
book.
I made my own book challenge and I just try to make sure I read, be it a chapter or two, but I try to make sure I read several times a week. I haven't drilled down to specific, like, let me do an hour a day or a chapter a day. But like I said, I've co-mingled it right now with my exercise. So when I'm on the treadmill, I know I'm going to be on the treadmill at least 3 to 4 times a week. I know that I'm going to be on for anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes. And within 30 and 60 minutes, I know I'm going to listen to at least a chapter. And most right now with the intuitive way, the chapters run about 20, 22 minutes. So I know that's going to give me anywhere from, 2/3 to a third of my workout, which is good. And then we'll see what February brings.
Right. When you were talking about audiobooks, uh have you actually done or recorded audio for any of the books that you've written for yourself,
I
for
have.
from others?
Yeah, well, so I have recorded for my first book, The Greatest Soul Journey, which I did back in 2009, which is a workbook style journal. I did do that as an audiobook, and it was very interesting. I went into the studio, I did it. The person who did the sound engineering and so forth told me that I should have entered it for Grammy consideration. I know. And I was just, and he's like, there's a whole, spoken word category. I think it would be great. So forth and so on. I didn't follow through at the time because unfortunately some family life crises took place with my parents' health. And that took my attention. But it definitely opened me to the possibility and the power of audio books. And like I said, this was back 2000. I must have did that in 2010, 2011. And so as a former educator, well, I'm still an educator, but a former early childhood and elementary school teacher and middle school teacher, um, when it comes to differentiation, I know it's important for learning styles to be able to receive information in different ways. And so I made sure with my children's book series that they come in print, but they also come in an audio book and what I do is the digital audio book with the illustrations and then with voiceovers. So, and I do versions where I'm the sole narrator, but then I also do get voiceover artists to add some little punch and flair to some of the characters.
That's cool.
Mhm.
So we were you mentioned the band. So let's start with this question. So what do you believe is the biggest obstacle that is that is facing our community,
Yeah.
especially now, in the wake of the current band or challenge books and the ones that could be
Hmm.
banned or challenged this year?
Yeah.
What do you think is like a major cause, a major obstacle with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge and obstacle, well, the biggest challenge is that it starts to eliminate representation for people. When I think about my books, I realize that my books will go to places, meet people, touch people that I will not ever physically meet, right? And that's the power of a book. And so when I look at that list, that current list, and I look at all of the people who would potentially connect with one of those stories and say, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. Or, oh my goodness, that's me. Or the moment when you read something, like I said in Sanaya Roman's The Personal Power Through Awareness book, when I read it and it was like, these are my words. Somebody wrote my words on paper. It gave me an additional breath of life because it was like, I'm not the only one that thinks this. I'm not the only one that feels this. This person was able to express what had been inside of me in a way that I did not know how to articulate and express. It was so freeing that when I look at that band list, there will be people who won't have immediate access to that extra layer of life and fulfillment. And I think that's a challenge.
I definitely, yeah, I I concur. Eliminate eliminate representation,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So are there any books on, I think you may have mentioned one of them. Were there any books on the current band challenge books that you already read?
Yeah, there were books that I had, and it's interesting, there were some that were in my cart that I planned to read, and then there were some that I had begun to read but had not read in its entirety. And it was only because of time, and it was like I may have felt as though I got what I needed for that moment. And a lot of those books are really around cultural diversity and inclusion, systemic racism, and so forth, because I've done a lot of teaching workshops and so forth around that.
So was there, and then going back to your library of reading. So was there ever a story or narrative that was a challenge for you to get through, either because of the
Mm.
content or the subject matter that was being discussed?
It was. And it's so funny. As soon as I read that question, I knew exactly what it was. And
Yeah.
and it was a book called Too Scared to Cry. And it was by Dr. Lenore Terr, Terr. And it was one of the books that I had to read for school for psychology and abnormal psychology. And it talked about, and I think it actually came to me in a play therapy class in order to help children work through trauma. And the traumatic stories of children from infancy through childhood were so horrific that the content became very challenging to read. And even though it was to help me be a better clinician and prepare me for the work that I have done, it was emotionally impactful. And even as we talked about earlier with like the audiobooks, right, it activated that visual part of my brain. So now these images are playing in my head. So it's not just words on paper, they have now taken a form of life inside of me. And then those images then trigger the emotionality that comes with it. And so it became that book was very, very hard. And I was surprised. Like I said, I went to go check my library before this interview. And I was like, I wonder if this book is still here. Like, did I keep it or did I get rid of it? Because there are some books where it was like, I don't even want it in my house. I don't want it in my office. Um, but I was surprised it was still on my shelf. And I think it's because I understood, again, this realities and representation, right? These stories were not made up stories, these
Right.
were actual documented cases. And then we learned how to utilize therapeutic techniques that would be helpful in healing for these individuals.
And it was called Too Scared to Cry. And I'm sorry, who was the author again?
Yes, the author is Dr. Lenore. I believe it's Lenore, but her last name is Terr.
Lenore Terr.
Hmm.
Okay. I'll need to read that one then.
Yeah.
So, are there any right now? Are there any organizations, charities, or special events that are taking place that I could have my listeners and avid readers look into, that you either endorse or support or that you participate in?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm going to mention my nonprofit, which is Sisters for Harmony. And help, we do several things. The main thing that we do is we look to educate, empower, and unite women across the globe and encourage them to live their life on purpose and with purpose. And we do that in a number of ways. We do it with our monthly vodcast on my Ask Dr. Walls 525 YouTube page. And we bring just awareness of different resources that are available in the world. And we used to do a lot more before the pandemic, but in 2025, we have some events planned. We're in partnership with one organization called Learn, Empower, Grow. And on February 1st, so next Saturday, we will be doing a wellness event for early childhood teachers. because that's an industry of people who rarely get days off, and they work very long shifts, right? With a lot of stimuli, because we're
Yes.
talking 6 weeks old to many times 3, 4, 5-year old, and sometimes even higher, depending on the centers. And these children are getting care many times pre, before parents go to work. So sometimes that drop off is between 6 and 7 a.m. and that pickup isn't until 6 to 7 p.m. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And we don't think about, and many times when we're off, they're not off, right? They're because they're still receiving the children. And so it's such a high level of care and burnout. And it's an industry that I was in. I used to teach 6 weeks to 2 years old. So I know that life. And so that's an event that I, along, like I said, with the Learn, Empower, Grow group, is going to be providing wellness services for. And so Sisters for Harmony will be doing events like that. And as I mentioned, we are a registered 501(c)(3) nonprofit.
Will that event also be virtual for some?
That event this time is actually going to be in person.
Okay.
But we do once a month, the first Thursday of every month from 7 to 8 p.m. We do our virtual vodcast, as I mentioned on my YouTube channel at Ask Dr. Walls 525. And we will be also doing additional virtual and in-person events throughout the year.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. And
Mhm.
and you actually just answered the question. I was going to ask you what Sisters for Harmony was about.
Yes.
And then when I looked at your site, so um I was looking now I'm not sure. I didn't see this book of yours on Amazon, and it was one that was listed on your site.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that was recent. I think that one was recently
Okay.
published. The 101 goal getter.
Oh, Goal Getter 101.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's the one.
So, yeah, so that one, thank you for reminding me. I forgot I didn't put it on Amazon.
So it's called the
No,
go
no,
getter or goal?
goal.
Goal getter. Got it.
Yes, Goal Getter 101. So that's a digital download that I created, and I was running a course called Goal Getters. And because what I kept finding was that a lot of my clients were starting and stopping goals. And they were like, why do I keep not accomplishing? And I was like, I keep having the same conversation over and over, whether it's coaching clients, friends, and clinical clients. And I said, no problem. And so I created a workshop around it. And then I said, you know what? Let me create this book for it. And so that's what I ended up doing to help them and encourage them and really give them step-by-step guidance to help them get in the habit of completing the tasks and assignments that will help them reach their goals.
That's cool. So
Yes.
then my question comes to the children's book, Froggy-T and Bunnie,
Yes.
hip hop stories. How
Yes.
did that idea come to you?
So the Adventures of Froggy-T and Bunnie, a hip hop tale series, actually started somewhere between 2008 and 2010. And my business mentor, Dr. Tom Gordon, it was his birthday. And I wanted to, instead of buying him a birthday card, I wanted to do something a little different. And so he calls me Bunnie because he says I have more energy than the Energizer Bunny, and I'm the one that the Energizer Bunny comes to for energy. And,
That's cool.
and so I said so I wrote him a poem for his birthday. And in the poem, I say, but you're always hopping right along with me. So now I dub you Froggy-T because his name is Thomas.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and
Wow.
so I gave him the poem, I gave him a stuffed frog. And the poem just kept staying with me. And it was like, if you flesh this out a little bit more, this would really be a good children's story. And so that's what I did. And I put the tail end, type of piece of and they live happily ever after type thing. Because initially I was thinking it was a one and done
Yeah.
type. But I had no idea it was going to take me about 10 years to find an illustrator to turn this into a story. And in 2020 was when I met my illustrator virtually. It was someone who I had known, but I knew them as an animator, not as an illustrator. So I
Same.
never put it together until I was talking with someone and they said, why don't you, they said, because I told them I wanted to get it animated eventually. And they said, well, why does it have to come after the illustration? And I was like, technically, it doesn't. And that's
Mm.
when I called and we ended up having a meeting. He was like, my team does illustrations too. No, I never thought about it. And so that was that. And then when I looked at, they actually showed me
Mhm.
um, I love the process. They send you you send them your concepts and then they create from your words what you want. And when they sent back a sample, they said, is this kind of what you're thinking about? And when they sent this picture over here, when I saw this water and I saw these hills, it opened up my mind that there were all of these other stories and what's going on in the water, what's life like behind those trees. And next thing you know, stories just started pouring out. And then I wrote Feeling Feelings. And then we went into the store in the studio, excuse me, to record the reunion, which was the first book, with my voiceover artist. And in the process of being in the studio, the voice of Bunnie says, Bunnie better have my money. We were just talking off mic and she said it, and we all start cracking up. Well, that line stayed in my head. And that night when I went home, I stayed up and I wrote Bunnie gets bullied.
Mhm.
And there's the line in it. She gets bullied by the Bull Lee brothers. So they're bulls and their last name is Lee. And so she gets bullied by the Bull Lee brothers. And in there, baby bully Jerome tells Bunnie she better run on home. And they start singing, Bunnie better have my money. And
Wow.
so that's what happened there. Um, so yeah, so
That's
that's the
cool.
story behind it.
What I loved when I was looking at your website was that when I clicked on the link to the stories, it talked about the benefits. Can you just go over some of the benefits that were mentioned on that?
Oh yeah, for sure. The story, so as I mentioned, I have a background in early childhood elementary education. I was a middle school teacher. I also did adult literacy. I was also a social emotional consultant for many years and still do it now. So these books allow me to pour all of that into it. So there's coping skill development. If they're in a lot of the stories, it'll talk about taking deep breaths and the importance of breathing. There's life skill development. They're teaching self-control, self-awareness, monitoring what are you feeling? So feelings identification. How are those feelings impacting your thoughts? How are those feelings impacting your behaviors? Making wise choices, like although you may be feeling angry right now, is now the best time to address something, or should I wait till later? Teaching people to go to wise counsel as opposed to going to those friends who may be like, yeah, yeah, make sure you do that, and it's like, no, go talk to someone who's going to direct you in a decision that's going to make you proud.
What do you mean by wise counsels? Like actual
Actually
actual
going, yeah. So, like, for instance, in the story, Feeling Feelings, Froggy-T says something to Bunnie that's very rude.
Mhm.
And so now she's upset. And but she's also worried about him. So she has all of these feelings going on inside of her. She's also mad at him because she was in a great mood until he said this rude comment to her. And so she's like, how do I navigate being concerned about him because that's not normally how he is, but also being mad that he said this to me and now he's messed up my day. And
Mm.
I'm also confused because is there something wrong with our friendship that I don't know about? And now I'm possibly sad because I don't want to lose that friendship, right? She's got all of this going on. I don't know how to navigate all of those feelings that are happening at one time. And then along comes Thomas, the wise old turtle. So he sits down with her and she then says, I have all these feelings going on. What am I supposed to do? And so he symbolizes that wise counsel that is to direct her and help her learn how to navigate her feelings and her thoughts.
That's cool. Any
Yeah.
other benefits that our readers should know about the stories?
Yeah, I will also say,
I mean,
oh,
I'll definitely put the link below in the
thank you.
video, but
Yeah, all of this story, they encourage critical thinking, they encourage decision making. And also what I did in all of the books was there's a glossary at the end to encourage vocabulary and understanding, because I'm also building fluency and literacy. And then there's also activity questions at the end
uh,
so that the reader increases self-awareness and can go back into the story to find more information that they may not have recognized at first. And those questions are great for the reader themselves, but they're also great conversation starters for parents and for teachers and counselors. But the other thing that's great is it's great for siblings. So, like, I have 7 and 8 year olds because the books do rhyme that start to learn the words, and I push that vocabulary. I put in words like unequivocally, I put in words like uncouth, right? So, because I just have this picture of this little kid missing teeth in the front trying to get those words out, and they just sound so cute to me as they're working on those words, right? But to build that vocabulary. But as I was saying, I have older siblings who then learn the pattern, the pacing, the words, and then they read it to their younger siblings, right? And so, yeah, it's very special. I had a third grader send me a video recently. She was endorsing my book. And so it was the cutest thing. Her grandmother sent it to me. And
oh
she
my
says,
goodness.
I'm in third grade and I take the Adventures of Froggy-T and Bunny down to the kindergarten classes and I read it to them. And it's a very good book. But here's this confidence that's built in this third grader that she can go read these stories to these kids and they're safe enough, right, content wise, and it's building these social skills and building character development and encouraging them. We got a call the other night from a parent, and he was like, I am so tired of reading Froggy-T and Bunny to my 2 year old, not even two. He's not two yet. He said, I have read this one book at least 20 times. Just Froggy Fool and Mungo. And he's like, the book is long. And like, I need her to think about the parents when she's reading it. And it was just so funny. But the fact that this little boy is so engaged in this story is wonderful. And so my husband says, well, do you have all 5 books? And the guy, he said, 5. He's like, I only have 3. Oh my goodness, like I gotta get the other 2 so that the lab, but that's also right. It's encouraging for me because I do also have other books that are written and edited and just are in process of going through the illustration period.
Okay, so that was going to bring up to my next question. What are the current projects that are in the making at the
In the
moment?
works. Yes, yes. So like
Yeah.
I said, I have two additional books that are currently in process. Another one will be another story. Let me be clear. Another story will be released sometime this year. I also now have coloring and activity books. And so I release those as I develop them. And I'm also so excited because I recently started working with green screen and just all the look at you.
Curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there'll be some Bunny and Froggy-T activities there for young people, and like with STEM, like Bunny goes to Saturn and what she learns about with Saturn. And so really pouring in those STEAM type activities, really pouring in the educational pieces. Froggy T and Bunny are learning the alphabet and their numbers. I also make soundscapes. So they have their own YouTube channel, Froggy T and Bunny. Um,
Okay.
and so but I do soundscapes to help with relaxation when it's that calming time, when it's that nap time. And I'll utilize it with some of my like 12-year-olds and see how does this sound? And within 2 to 3 minutes, their eyes are glazed over and they're like, oh, it works.
I was actually going to ask you, um, what, so how did you, what was the inspiration behind you going from educator to
Mhm,
becoming a psychotherapist, a
mhm.
counselor, and then to top it all off, how you managed to get your PhD? I'm just curious.
So it was actually sixth grade career day when I asked my classmate what was the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Her father was a psychiatrist, so I knew she knew the answer. And she told me, the difference between the two. And I said, okay. And my grandfather was an MD and my father was a veterinarian. So I was already thinking like I want to be the first female Dr. Walls in my family, but what do I want it to be in? And did I want to follow my father's footsteps? Did I want to follow my grandfather's footsteps? Or did I want to forge my own path? And so when she told me that a psychologist, right, didn't have to go to medical school, but would still be considered a doctor, was someone who listened and so forth. And I was already deemed, by the time I was 8 years old, I was known to be a fantastic listener. I was known to give sage advice when asked. I was like, these were all things that was already built inside of me. So by the time I got to be 11, 12 years old, I was very confident in those skills. And when I found out that's what a psychologist did, it was like a match made in heaven. And so that became my goal. Now, what happened was undergrad, the best you could get with a psychology degree was really research. And I knew I wasn't interested in doing research. I wanted to do therapy. And so it was like, all right, what job can you get after you graduate before you go get your master's and your doctorate? Because at that time, I still had to wait 3 to 5 years before I could even apply for a master's degree. So, what am I going to do for employment for 3 to 5 years? And it was like, well, an education degree, if you can teach, you can work anywhere. I can go into companies and do professional development. I can go in the classroom. I can do tutoring. I can go overseas. Like teaching was just a skill that would just keep on giving.
Mhm.
And so that's why I opted for education. And then that's what I did. Like I said, I taught early childhood, I then taught middle school. And then it was like when it was time for me to go back and get my master's and then on to get my PsyD.
Why would you have to wait 4 to 5 years to get the master's? Just out
That
of
was just the
curiosity.
requirement at that point in time. That was what
Mm.
was explained to me back in 1989, 1990, that you had to wait 3 to 5 years before you could apply, versus now you have more people who go straight from an undergrad into at the time, I believe the thinking was that they wanted people with some quote unquote worldly experience that they could draw from as opposed to just a straight through student. And I would say for me, it made a huge difference. There was so much, my mind had changed by the time I started school. I started my doctorate at 27. So I had life experience in the working world. I had worked with students, like I said, from 6 weeks old all the way through at that point, 12, 13, 14 years old was my oldest student at that time. I had worked with children outside of the classroom in residential treatment facilities, so children who had histories of trauma. Like I had a bag full of experience by the time I entered into the classroom, so that for me, the material that I was learning, I could connect it to experiences that I had, which helped me integrate the information more.
Wow, that's great. Do you have time to go over the book that I did get from you?
Yes.
And I was actually going to ask you this question because this is volume one. This is Live by the
Mm-hmm.
Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
Inspired Thoughts. I didn't know if you go to the beginning. Come on. Yeah, this is a Live by the Spirit, Inspired Thoughts, volume one. Are we going to
Yes.
be hopefully seeing maybe a volume two?
Trust and believe. I had hoped volume two would have been out by now, but yes, there will be. Volume two does exist. And these were thoughts, these are writings that I've done over the past 20, 25 years, that I have pulled together to compile. And so volume one, I felt as though those were thematically, they kind of went together versus some of the ones that I had pulled aside for volume two. So it's funny you asked me because the other day I was looking for something and I came across my pile that I am to sort through and create volume two from. So yes. So
So it would
thank you,
also
Becca.
be
I now have two things on my list. Thank you.
so with this one, what I liked is that it's an actual like again, it's like the goal getter. It's a
Working book.
workbook. And this one was
Yeah.
I guess this is more like a journal thing,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. So again, food for thought. So my thinking behind the Live by the Spirit pieces is they are moments of inspiration, clarity, just all of a sudden you just understand how something works for you. And this is the experience that I had that led to this understanding, right? Short snippets that hopefully will unlock something in somebody else for them to say, oh, that reminds me of when I dot, dot, dot. And so that's why the writing space is there so that you're not trying to squeeze it in a margin and then you go back and look and you can't read what you wrote. So at least there's writing space right there for you to start to flesh your thoughts out in a clear manner. And therefore, if you want to move it over into another journal of some sort, even if it's a Froggy-T and Bunnie journal, which I've also created. But if you want to move it into a journal for you to flesh out even further, the beginning parts of your thoughts are clear.
I wanted to go over a few of them. One of them,
Hmm.
because what I do is that I highlighted. I'm still learning the gist of this Kindle in my hand.
Yes.
But on this one here from the second chapter,
Okay.
you said my mother used to say, when your mouth is open, your ears are closed. Therefore,
Hmm.
if you close your mouth, your ears will be open from Psalms 46:10. Be
Hmm.
still and know that I am God. What is NLT?
Oh, the New Living Translation.
Oh, that's what you were saying before. New Living
Yes.
Translation.
Yes.
New Living Translation. As you live by the Spirit, you are partnering with something greater than yourself to live a life greater than you could ever think of or imagine. So when we hear, we perceive a sound, but when we listen, we give our attention, wait attentively, and or follow the directions.
Hmm. Hmm.
And why does that one I can't think of the word. Why does that one resonate?
Yeah, so for me, I have done so much teaching on the difference between hearing and listening, right? You have a lot of people who you're talking to, they hear sound, but they're not actively thinking about what the person is saying. They're not looking at the body language of the person and making sure there's a match or what the discrepancies are, right? So this is the difference between hearing, listening, and active listening.
Mhm.
And so I even think about it like I just heard a sound in the background outside. I heard it, but I didn't tend to it to discern what it is and do I need to do something? Versus if I hear a siren and it parks right outside the window, now all of a sudden I'm discerning, is that a fire truck? Is that an ambulance? Is that a police car?
Yep.
Right? It signals something to me the more I listen and attend to it to then determine what are my best next steps.
So by saying this, do you think that people are not actively listening to the silence
Mm-hmm.
that they should be
Mm-hmm.
listening for that still inner voice?
Guidance, 100%. And so many times, if you think about, people will, after the fact of something, they'll say, you know what? I did have a thought or I did have an inkling, but I didn't listen. And it's like, well, why didn't you listen to yourself? Even when I work with my clients, they'll talk about the number of times they didn't listen to themselves. And I get on them and I say, but you're upset with your spouse or your partner or your friend or your boss not listening to you, but you're not even listening to you. And then it's like, oh, ouch, right? So encouraging people to listen, because all of our answers generally are inside of us. We may need someone to help us put those pieces together sometime,
Yeah.
but many times if we just sit with ourselves, and a lot of times people have a challenge sitting in silence and going through. We talk about meditation, we talk about that monkey mind, we talk about getting through all of those thoughts and controlling what we're actually thinking about and hearing. Go ahead.
What is the monkey mind? Just out of
That,
curiosity.
yeah, that monkey mind is all of those just kind of rambling thoughts and just the inability to be still. And many times those thoughts they may not even be thoughts that you want to have. So being able to be more mindful of our mind and tend more to the thoughts that we want and release those thoughts that are not helpful to us or that we don't want to focus on right now.
Her with that one. This one I highlighted. Ooh, there's a whole lot. So this one I highlighted just below that, where you're talking in who wrote in a course in miracles?
Hmm.
Who wrote that?
I don't know. That's the whole thing with the Course in Miracles, is that it is divinely, according to the intro, these are just divinely inspired writings, but there's no author to it.
Okay.
So the author is the divine. So the person who compiled it, to my knowledge, they did not give their name to it.
Understood. So here it says here, many times people have good intentions for us, but it is important to remember that spirit has the greatest intentions for us. So the question is, do you want good, better, or as you say, the greatest? It is really up to you. The choice is yours. If you have
Mhm.
decided on having the greatest for yourself, then I encourage you to practice being still and listening so that you can learn to live and be led by the spirit. Just as with most skills in life, being still and listening are skills that need practice and will become stronger over time. Some have found it helpful to pray, meditate, listen to music, or journal. Take a few minutes right now and ask Spirit to speak to you. In the stillness of the moment, you may be led to call someone. Your phone may ring, you may remember something long forgotten, or you may receive an email or text with the answer, sorry, that you seek or a message that you need. Just like you just what you just witnessed right now about that sound, we've the winds are so powerful that the house is shaking. So it's like,
Wow.
should we be warned again?
That's right.
But I wanted to bring up one thing, and I believe this was written by one of the interviewees that I had on my show on my vodcast. I'm gonna have to learn how to incorporate that. Her name is Rabbi Karen Kader, and she wrote this beautiful story of hers that I read the first time, called Dance of the Dolphin, and it was about this this older man and his grandson. The older man was blind, and I think it was the grandfather, and they were
Hmm.
all waiting for the king to appear, and the crowd
Hmm.
would go crazy every time that someone walked in. And so the little boy would ask him, is it the king? Is it the king? And he says, no, 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 I will let you know when it is the king. And suddenly the crowd falls silent. And then he turns to the little boy and he says, now the king has arrived.
Mm.
It just reminds me of that, being
Hmm.
still and listening, like we
Yeah,
are waiting for the spirit to come to us, and only in that not with all the crowds all around us, but
that's
just
right.
within that silence.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now the
Yeah.
spirit, Now I
Yeah.
can, whatever that spirit is.
That gave me chills. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
like it. I like
Yeah.
it.
So, and you take the listening still and being silent to extreme, like seriously for the clients. And how does the spirit come to you? Could it be one particular thing? Do you actually hear the voice, or like is it just a symbolic sign that comes to you sometimes?
For all the above, all the above. Sometimes it is just a clear, like, call now, call this person audio. Sometimes it is repetitive messages like, okay, like I'll even say, the other night, somebody sent me a message, and then Tuesday night, somebody sent me a message. Somebody different sent me a similar message last night. Okay, y'all got my attention. Now I just need to know what to do with it. Like I'm very clear on the fact that this is something I am to do, but now I have to be still and get my next best step so I know how to move forward.
So, on chapter 3, the spirit, you call this the spirit language.
Mm-hmm.
I think it pretty much is the same thing, but I'm going to see if there's anything different. I highlighted, when we live by the spirit, we have chosen to partner. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
partner with something greater than our physical selves. A little bit further down, give yourself time to sit still, listen, and move to the inner guidance that is speaking to you. This guidance and direction may come to you in a dream, when watching or listening to a television or radio show, while spending time in nature, or during an unexpected conversation. Once you
Mm-hmm.
activate and partner with your
Mm-hmm.
spirit, your guidance and direction will come in many forms. So be ready. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that connects
Mm-hmm.
to the chapter 4, which is the partnering with the spirit,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I found really, really, really unique. So when you're talking about partnerships, um, like in chapter 4, it talks about the partnership of Doc Holliday. I haven't seen Tombstone.
Okay.
I've not seen that. But you
Mm-hmm.
say here, Doc Holliday has a change of heart and purpose in life. And in one particular scene, he turns to his partner and he says, "We must redefine the
Mm-hmm.
nature of our association."
Mm-hmm. I
Can you go
love
a little
that.
bit more into that one?
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite lines from any movie of all time because he's recognizing that his purpose has changed, right? And how he's choosing to move and present himself in the world has changed. And so therefore he cannot be associated with and or affiliated with those previous ways because they are in contradiction to how he's choosing to move now. And because he's chosen to partner with Wyatt Earp, who is about integrity, whereas Doc Holliday was a scoundrel at first. And so now he's like, all right, if this is the way that I'm going to move, I have to leave old ways behind. Yeah.
And do you believe that that is essential for everyone? That if something was not working before, we have that the individual must learn to partner, or to what is that word? To separate themselves from
Hmm.
that association entirely, or to still keep it, but have a different type of spiritual partnership within themselves that will help them navigate better.
Yeah, and that's it. And that goes back to Froggy Foo and Mungu, where he had to take an honest look at himself. Where is he now and where does he want to be? And what has to be released in order for him to move in his direction that he wants to go. And depending on what you choose to release will also determine usually the swiftness at which you are going to achieve that goal and or that new identity. Oh, goodness. I have to go to my next meeting. So,
All right. I did have some more questions on the highlighted, but pretty much, yeah, you covered it. So it was wonderful talking to you, Dr.
yes,
Walls, and
thank you.
I will update you. I want to read these books that you um that you recommended for us. So
Okay.
it was great talking to you, and I'm
You
looking forward
too.
to volume 2
Yes.
and the next two children's books.
All right. Thank
And
you.
I will definitely keep in touch with you.
All right, definitely. We'll
All right.
talk again. All right,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.